Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast for the World Builders, or maybe this is your first time joining us. And this is going to be, I'm going to kind of skip the traditional intro because I have been away from this podcast for what feels like months. I don't know how long it's actually been. I think the last episode was December, so maybe 1 month, but it feels like it's been way longer than that. And so I want to actually just acknowledge and take responsibility that I low-key ghosted y'all. But I think it was a few things. I mean, of course it was winter. But then so maybe three things. It was winter, but then part of it was I didn't have anything new to say, right? So I wasn't about to come up on here and just make some shit up. But I also was intuiting that we weren't needing a conversation about business, creative entrepreneurship, marketing, or money, which is usually what we cover inside of this podcast through a Black feminist lens. I was intuiting that we needed something different. We were craving something different. And in silence and stillness, right, I was trying to feel for the conversations that I know I've been craving, and by extension, trusting that you've been craving too. Aside from that, I was also writing a manuscript. Wait, let me grab the manuscript. Y'all, if you are watching the video of this, then you can see her. Y'all, draft zero is in my hands, and it just feels super exciting and I'm super proud. And I call it draft zero because y'all, I haven't even read it yet. I haven't even read the whole thing yet. I noticed what was happening, and I'd love to hear other writers' experience of this. But I noticed for like a year, I would like write chapter one, rework chapter one. I was in this cycle of editing, rewriting. And I was like, if I keep doing it this way, I will literally be doing this for years, right? I won't get past chapter one for you know, the next 10 years. So I was like, you know what? Let's just write the story. Let me just tell the story to myself first, right? And then trust that I can go back and edit and revise and look at it from a different lens and a different posture. And what's been so fascinating is as I've been reading through chapter one, two, three, as I've been inside the revision process and like rereading it or reading it to myself for the first time, it's wild the ways in which I'm able to kind of remember where I was when I wrote that thing months ago. So that's been a fun experience. But I mentioned the manuscript and how I've been tending to that because I'm also very aware of all the ways in which so much of my pedagogy is embodied, so much of what I teach, preach, share, offer inside this podcast and inside of Cedar School is a direct result of me actually practicing what I preach, right? And me actually going through the creative initiations that I'm then able to share my experience of, right? If that makes sense. So I knew I needed to kind of duck off and honor that sacred process. I needed to duck off and be in integrity with my practice, right? What I look like inviting y'all to stop avoiding your desire, and I'm out here avoiding mine. I'm not, tending to my own zone of desire and world building ecosystem. So that's just a little bit of backstory on where I've been that I felt obligated to share because I love this space. I love us being in asynchronous conversation in this way. Um, and every time I'm away from the podcast, I'm reminded of how much I love this practice, right? There's something very, very cosmic about projecting your voice out into the world with love and intention, not knowing who exactly is listening, but knowing someone is, right? I love thinking about how our love offerings, our dispatches shape the world in unseen and unknowable and incalculable ways, right? It's a far out feeling. And I'm glad to be back for however long or short. But if you are returning to this podcast, you know that we start every episode with a sensorium grounding, right? The topics that we cover in the podcast are often activating. I'll say they activate me, which is why I press record and I talk about it because I'm like, do you feel it too? Right? So what we're going to do inside of our sensorium grounding is we're going to ground down in our sensorium by taking 3 deep breaths. We're going to notice something we can see, taste, hear, smell, can touch, something that we can feel beyond the senses we have language for. Maybe even we can notice something that we want to give thanks for, something that is supporting us in this moment that we really just didn't notice until we placed our attention on it and um, took a few deep breaths to acknowledge it. Acknowledge all the ways we're being supported right now, whether that's inside your car, the wheels that are turning to get you to where you need to be, whether that's on a bus, on a train. How is this vessel getting you to where you need to be, whether that's to work or to loved ones or to an errand, right? Maybe you're on a walk, right? How can we ground down into the trees that are supporting your breath right now, the mycelial network under your feet if you're in the forest, the mycelial network of mutual aid, right? Happening right under the forest floor. What are the things? Maybe you're in your studio and you're surrounded by objects you can create with at any moment. Maybe you are in your kitchen and you're surrounded by sustenance and reflections of family, joy, belonging. Um, yeah, let's just ground into that for a few breaths here. Close your eyes with me if that feels safe, possible, accessible in this moment. All right, y'all, let's begin. 3 deep breaths here. Mm, mm. I can feel my heart beating inside of my hand as I place my hand on my heart. Can smell my incense in the background that I lit just before pressing record to let me know and to signal to my sensorium and to my body that the ceremony has begun. Right? What's going on inside your sensorium? Let's take a moment to acknowledge that. Now let's check in on our mood and intention, right? Because we know this colors our experience in a multitude of ways, right? And your mood and intention is going to color how you receive this podcast episode and do whatever you're about to do next. And also, my mood and intention is going to color how I show up and record inside of this space. So I always love to check in on our mood and intention whenever we are sharing space together or whenever we're about to embark on something together. And y'all, my mood right now is I am feeling so buoyed by interdependence. And if I'm honest, it's something I struggle with. Right. And, I'm a Capricorn rising, so I almost want to like blame it on my astrology. But I know it's simply the systems we're surviving. that have us feel like interdependence is less safe and more destabilizing than independence. Right? It's the water we're swimming in, this obsession with the rugged individual. Um, like this is what neoliberalism does, right? It tells us that there are very narrow pathways to survival, i.e., the nuclear family, i.e., traditional employment, i.e., um, cozying up with white supremacy when and wherever possible, right? Cozying up with state sanctioned activities when and wherever possible, right? So I'm not gonna blame that on the astrology. Like I'm not gonna say that I struggle with interdependence because of some way in which I came into the world. I struggle with interdependence because I'm surviving capitalism, and that's kind of some of the codes embedded in it. So I am so grateful in this moment that I'm feeling buoyed by it, by interdependence. I am feeling safe inside of interdependence. I am feeling held, very gently and securely held inside interdependence in this moment. And that's my mood. My intention for recording this podcast episode, which may be somewhat alluded to inside the title of it, is I'm seeing, and maybe you've seen it too, I'm seeing a lot of folks call for the public shaming of AI users and AI defenders. And while that gets a lot of social media engagement, and while I understand the righteous rage, trust me, I do, the frustration, right? The moral outrage, right? Like, can't y'all see what's going on? Like what, like, I think there's this desire to just want to like shake us awake, which sometimes um can read as like shaming others. But I get the source, I get the I'm not even gonna call it a reflex because that kind of feels like it that feels patronizing. I don't think it's something as I don't want to be dismissive. I'll say again, I understand it. I understand the shaming of AI users and AI defenders. But I also know shame doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. It's sticky. It's sticky. It's attention grabbing, but it's not effective. Shame induces silence, but self-respect induces power. What we need right now is to ground down and root in our collective power, our worker power. That's why I wrote this essay that I'm about to read. And if you've already read the newsletter, I want to invite you to listen and engage in a different sensory experience, right? There's also an invitation into the Laboratory of Erotic Engineering at the end, so stay tuned for that. But if you haven't received the newsletter in your inbox yet, what you doing, friend? What are we doing? Go ahead and subscribe. The link to subscribe is in the show notes. Now to the newsletter, which I have here. I'm going to read a physical copy. Um, I know folks normally kind of read from their um, computer when sharing their newsletters or their Substack essays, but I'm like, there's something about having a copy that feels appropriate. So the title of this week's love letter is Transmuting AI Shame into Erotic Self-Respect on Listening to Your Body, Not the Machine. Out of curiosity, I started playing around with ChatGPT back in 2023. Underwhelmed and unsure how to use the tool, I abandoned it. It wasn't until 2025 that I returned to the product. First to get itinerary ideas for a family vacation to an unfamiliar place, then to upload a picture of some unknown piece of plumbing to troubleshoot a DIY solution. And before I knew it, I was using it as a productivity tool to assist with work tasks like project management and suggesting edits to client proposals. I started to see the headlines on the ecological toll ChatGPT calls on the environment, the threads stating each prompt requires the equivalent of a bottle of water started to catch the corner of my eye. But I wasn't ready to forfeit the time it saved me and the relief it provided. So I closed my eyes and my ears, put my head down, and kept plowing through my daily to-do lists. Eventually, the unarticulated knowing that my actions were indeed misaligned with my politic festered into shame. In an attempt to soothe my own shame around my AI usage, I almost recorded a podcast titled A Pure Politic on AI Feels Problematic and Boring. I started to draft a script with the following bullet points. I don't think we need to shame Black women for using AI to draft her emails because she's begging for the world to give her a break and it just won't. I don't think we need to shame the young person alone in their room using chat as a social companion inside systems of oppression that have literally engineered the loneliness epidemic that they are now declaring a public health crisis. An epidemic they engineered into our economy, housing, education, food, environment, relationships, etc. I don't blame the overworked and underpaid teachers using AI. I don't judge the employee for taking courses on ChatGPT to stay competitive, quote unquote, in a difficult job market, right? I don't have beef with the worker with ADHD who uses it to take meeting notes. In the end, I couldn't finish the script. I couldn't record the podcast. Something was missing, and that something was integrity. I spent time inside the private mirror of my journal pages and decided I wasn't going to use my platform to placate my own shame. We're a few dozen rebirths away from that tired behavior. Instead, I decided to transmute my shame into self-respect and offer something more honest, a reflection that felt more aligned with my values and sense of integrity inside my own world building practice. Here it goes. My transmutation process started with education. I picked up Atlas of Power, Atlas of AI, Power, Politics, and the Planetary Cost of Artificial Intelligence by Kate Crawford, and Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's Open AI by Karen Howe. I also returned to the staple texts I already had in my library, Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code by Ruha Benjamin, Dark Matters on the Surveillance of Blackness by Simone Brown, and Algorithms of Oppression, how search engines, I'm like looking for the book above uh, 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 in the um in the library above me. Um, But I return to Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism by Sophia Noble. Instead of relying on willful ignorance to protect the self-perception of my own goodness, air quotes, or more harmful innocence, air quotes, I power I started to pour through the reporting on the ecological harm data centers caused or I'm sorry, I started to pour through the reporting on the ecological harm data centers powering AI usage are causing to Black communities. If your algorithm is anything like mine, you've seen the headlines too. And just in case you haven't, here they are. Their water taps ran dry when Meta built next door. How data centers are stealing or are sending your power bill soaring. How the AI data center boom impacts Black communities. After a white town rejected a data center, developers targeted a Black area. Drone footage shows Musk's AI power plant flouting clean air regulations in Black community. Elon Musk's ex-AI facility is polluting South Memphis. Data centers power our online lives. The business is growing faster in Metro Atlanta than anywhere else in the US. Data centers spark a fight for the soul of this mostly Black Maryland county. The last one hit close to home, literally. The Black Maryland county they're referring to is my hometown, Prince George's County. It's the place that raised me and the place where I currently live and work. This is when the transmutation process went from education to conversation. I began talking to friends, family, and neighbors about the proposed data centers coming to our county. I talked to my childhood best friend whose electric bill has doubled in the last month. The childhood best friend whose house I visit almost weekly. The childhood best friend whose house is 5 minutes away from a proposed data center site. I tried to gauge concern amongst my loved ones. It was clear we didn't want these data centers in our backyards. What was unclear was whether or not we were prepared to completely suspend our own AI usage. I try to have the conversation with my dad about the economic and environmental toll AI data centers are having on the Black community we're a part of, Prince George's County, Maryland, and the Black communities we are in solidarity with across Baltimore, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia, South Memphis, Tennessee, Colton County, South Carolina, South Haven, Mississippi, and everywhere in between. His consistent refrain goes something like this: AI is here. Either Black folks get aboard the train or get left behind. I meet it with compassion because this is a common generational divide rooted in the economic uncertainty many Black folks faced on the other side of Jim Crow, where almost any opportunity for advancement was deemed a quote unquote good opportunity for the sole reason that it was better than the previous reality animated by quote unquote no opportunity. My dad also grew up in Pittsburgh, where he watched many of his elders, neighbors, and family friends get quote unquote left behind when the steel mills closed in the late 1970s and the mid 1980s. I hold compassion for it all and remind him our last name is Cotton. I remind him we were brought to this country as capital. Maybe we do get quote unquote left behind inside capitalism, a system that never accounted for us beyond the status of raw material, commodity, collateral, chattel. Perhaps it is a mercy to be quote unquote left out of that equation. Perhaps trying to quote unquote get ahead inside systems founded on Black death is in most cases a suicide mission. The familiar truth invites a shared silence that hangs low, too low, so the subject changes. This isn't a love letter inviting us to refrain from using AI when producing slop, cartoons, and caricatures. If you're subscribed to this newsletter, I trust you're past that. I want to talk about how we completely refrain from using AI inside the desire to increase our productivity. A tender conversation I don't see us holding enough space for. I didn't start using AI for fun. I started using AI because I was burnt out. And I'm writing this because I'm sure I'm not alone. There are folks who are using ChatGPT to tell them what they do for work. And then there are folks who are using ChatGPT to get through the workday. Not because they can't do their job without it, but because We exist in a work culture that worships speed over spirit and breaking things over the sacred work of tending, mending, and maintenance. This is what came up in the conversations I had. Some of us are using AI to quote unquote create an advantage over folks. Capitalism recasts from comrade to competitor. Few are guilty, but all are responsible, is a quote by Abraham Joshua Heschel. And I heard Zindolo Diamina, I want to make sure I'm saying their name right, reference this quote in today's Becoming the People podcast episode with Prentice Hemphill. And I've been thinking about that podcast episode all morning. Few are guilty, but all are responsible, right? And the only winners in a game that turns comrades into competitors are the guilty few. Instead, I want to talk to the ones who are quietly using AI because they're carrying the world on their back. And this tool feels like cognitive relief. The ones who are burnt out from too long periods of overworking, suppressing grief, and dopamine roller coasters inducing brain fog they didn't have last year, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. The ones who hit max capacity months ago and are now running on fumes to survive. The ones who are silently using AI to keep their jobs, jobs that feed entire families in their own household and extended families and household across seas and time zones. I want to talk to the ones who might not be quote unquote guilty, but are responsible. What you might be feeling is shame for using AI as you watch the environmental justice reports roll out. As you listen to Black kin asking you to stop your AI usage, at least for Black History Month on your For You page. As you go to your local town halls and hear your neighbors with chronic illnesses refuse to be swayed by the county revenue that data centers quote unquote promise. As you talk to your elders and hear them lament dramatic electric bill increases. You might be feeling shame for your silent AI usage, but here's the thing about shame, it's flimsy. It does not work, and no one needs it. We can't do anything with your shame because it festers into toxicity and is usually quietly held alone inside suffering and isolation. We can't use your shame, but what we can use in this moment is your self-respect. For it is self-respect that often extends to the scale of community. When we transmute AI shame into self-respect, what becomes actionable? What becomes possible? What agency is activated? I'm a Black feminist software engineer. I knew better. Data centers are being built in my Black ass community of Prince George's County next door to my neighbors, elders, and best friend, and I'm complicit. I mean, I'm writing a novel based in an abolitionist Black feminist community named Psychofa, where data farms are data forests, for goodness sakes. I knew better. This is what some of my internal shame spirals sounded like. And if I'm honest, they're all true. I knew better. I'm responsible. And using quote unquote burnout as an excuse to cause harm to the ecosystems and neighbors that support my breath is actually quite corny. Now what? If the first step in the process of transmuting AI shame into self-respect is education, and the second step is conversation, then the third step is action. If I can say it, let me. I think that Blacks in the diaspora feel captive despite the patent freedom we experience, despite the fact that we are several hundred years away from the door of no return, despite the fact that the door does not exist, despite the fact that we live in every state of self-agency, some exceedingly powerful, some less so, of course, but self-agency nonetheless. One might even argue for the sheer magnificence of our survival against history yet. And that's a quote from Dion Brand. I keep returning to this Dion Brand quote to remind me of my self-agency and how complicatedly uncomplicated it is. Based on my conversations, many of us are silently using AI as a productivity tool and a welcomed collaborator inside a work culture where burnout is the new baseline. Like Prentice Hemphill says, the line keeps moving. Aside from willfully inducing ecological disasters, what's most dangerous about AI usage as a productivity tool is it allows us to artificially push through. Keep going. Don't quit. Inside a collective moment where we're all being called to slow down long enough to grieve, to feel, to heal, to completely reimagine the culture of work and how we hold our human resources, quote unquote, in common. When we transmute shame for using AI tools for productivity into refusal and erotic self-respect, we start to reclaim our agency and imagine how we might collectively steward our power as working class folks, y'all. I don't need to dig up the statistics to tell you how many working class folks are dealing with some level of burnout or somatic overwhelm. You can feel it in your body or inside the group chat on Sunday evening. So this AI push came just in time, right? When everyone was quiet quitting, the stigma for taking mental health days off was deteriorating, and sabbaticals were becoming in vogue beyond academia. If we know anything about workplace culture under capitalism, we know the line of quote unquote enough will continue to move. AI promises to extend your capacity, improve your productivity, and get more done in a day than would be healthy for any single body to hold. The productivity gurus will invite you to leverage AI to go from the level of output of a single worker to the level of output of an entire team. Again, the line keeps moving. If individuals are now expected to learn how to carry the workload of entire teams, what's next? We are not responsible for your lost or stolen relatives. We cannot guarantee your safety if you disobey our instructions. We do not endorse the causes or claims of people begging for handouts. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. This is an excerpt from Harriet Mullen's poem titled "We Are Not Responsible." The billionaire class, industry leaders in the C-suite, and government officials are all singing the same tune. AI is here, and we can't help you if you don't get on board. The current culture of work has made it clear our AI refusal will have consequences on how quote unquote competitive we might be in a labor market. But when we stop seeing our fellow workers as competition, a different calculus can emerge. One where worker power can refuse productivity at all costs and advocate for periods of rest, grief, and recovery. A reality where We work at the pace of our bodies and the shape of our breath, a culture where deliverables and timelines don't demand we leave our nervous system, each other, and our ecosystems behind. When we transmute shame into self-respect, we start to pride ourselves on rigorous ease over relentless productivity. We start to ask, what work is mine to do? And what's a schedule that reflects my self-regard, self-respect, and self-agency instead of my self-abandonment? Because to be clear, when we abandon our ecosystems and communities, we are abandoning ourselves. In the future, nah, scratch that. Right now, what's going to set us apart from the status quo as world building practitioners is not AI competency and proficiency. Let's be clear. Instead, it will be the level of poesis we can weave into every encounter with our work. More emails, slide decks, websites, proposals, sales invitations, and art that read like poetry instead of expediency. Neoliberal techno-determinism is nothing new, but this everyday AI usage is. What does worker power look like in the age of AI for employees, freelancers, and world builders like us? For me, it looks like aligning my work with my actual capacity instead of my artificial capacity. It looks like slowing down the mornings, intentionally doing less than I quote unquote think I'm capable of, and doing a few things well instead of doing many things at once. When ambition at all costs leaves your body, something sturdier like devotion, like erotic fuel, like self-respect emerges, and it turns out that's more than enough for a job well done. As Karen Howe reminds us, all AI tools don't have the same environmental costs. But if you are a self-employed practitioner who insists on using AI tools like ChatGPT at some point, you have to admit to yourself that you care more about productivity than working class Black folks. When I admitted that to myself, that's when everything around my AI usage shifted. Did this shift take entirely too long? No doubt. Was my shift too late? Absolutely not. The central questions AI is presenting us with are, do we care more about productivity than we care about water? Do we care more about productivity than we care about Black folks? Do we care more about productivity than we care about our own breath and clean air? Too simplistic? Maybe, maybe not. What I know for a fact about all matters of racial capitalism is this. Demanding nuance at every turn simply kicks the can down a road with the same destination. Black death becomes an acceptable trade-off in the name of quote unquote progress. Two things can be true. We're all tired, right? We're all tired with too little time to grieve and care for our communities. And AI is being presented as relief while the entire infrastructure of ecocide and necropolitics is hidden in plain sight. That's the crisis for us as workers. What about the possibilities? This is a break in the status quo. Shall we decide to take it? A deep departure in business as usual. The possibility this presents is a radical reimagining of how we labor, how we access nervous system safety inside the art of slowing down, and the liberation of enough. AI feels like relief because it extends our capacity. This is only soothing if operating at max capacity is how we access safety inside our body. In the age of AI, refusing self-sacrifice graduates from self-care TM to a political act of refusal. All these things are part of what artificial intelligence is. A two-word phrase onto which is mapped a complex set of expectations, ideologies, desires, and fears. AI can seem like a spectral force, a disembodied computation, but these systems are anything but abstract. They are physical infrastructures that are reshaping the earth while simultaneously shifting how the world is seen and understood. Artificial intelligence is the process of remapping and intervening in the world. It's politics by other means, although rarely acknowledged as such. These politics are derived or driven by the great houses of AI, which consist of the half or dozen so companies that dominate large-scale planetary computation. And that's an epigraph by Kate Crawford, the author of Atlas of AI, which I highly recommend. There is a 360 marketing campaign happening right before our eyes, on the tip of our tongues and our fingers, that says, quote, AI is here, and there's nothing you can do about it. This is politics by other means. And unfortunately, this is a marketing lie many of us are falling for, at one point, me included. But we can say, not so fast. Refusing the science fiction of AI marketing, we uphold a different set of beliefs. We believe in rivers. We believe in breath. We believe in people. And it is the elements of our aliveness that inform our politics by other means. In the case of AI, there is no singular black box to open, no secret to expose, but a multitude of interlaced systems of power. Complete transparency then is an impossible goal. Rather, we gain a better understanding of AI's role in the world by engaging with its material architectures, contextual environments, and prevailing politics, and by tracing how they are connected. That's another quote by Kate Crawford. The age of AI is inviting us to get curious about our desire. Some of us postpone or avoid taking action on our creative and political world-building visions because we don't fully understand them. We can't fully control them or know them. They're rife with uncertainty. Our desire can feel like a quote-unquote black box, too illegible to be safe. But as we know, understanding and legibility were never prerequisites for adoption or action. AI is a black box too, and some of us adopt and take action with it every day. The only prerequisite for adoption and action is desire. It has never been clarity. Inside the age of AI, the desire of capitalism is clear. Productivity at all costs. Now it's time to get clear on our desire. And the question before us is glaringly simple. Do we desire productivity more than we desire life? With erotic self-respect, may we collectively say no. That was this week's love letter, y'all. If you want to reflect even deeper alongside the ideas shared in this newsletter, then I want to invite you into the laboratory of erotic engineering. Of course, the name is inspired by Audre Lorde, uses of the erotic is power. The lab is for aligning your labor with Black feminist values in the age of AI. Let's name the most erotic job title you can imagine and get to work. On Thursday, March 12th, at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's exactly what we'll be doing. I want to invite you to join us in this upcoming workshop titled Create the Most Erotic Job Title You Can Imagine. Inside this workshop, we'll be exploring the politics of refusal and dreaming beyond productivity, porn, the temporal logics of capitalism inside the age of AI. This workshop is a direct response to the common refrain, I don't have a dream job because I don't dream of labor. Right? And my question and my response to that will always be, but what if we did? What if we dreamed of labor? What's the most erotic job we can imagine? And how does getting to work, right? Quote unquote, getting to work inside that vision look like? We'll also explore the politics of refusal because productivity porn and even some leftist movement spaces will prioritize a bias to action instead of a bias for refusal. Sometimes clarity on what we're no longer going to do can be just as powerful as knowing what we're doing, right? Fred Moten invites us to refuse that which has been refused to us. And how does that Lucille Clifton poem go? Why some people be mad at me sometimes? They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories, and I keep on remembering mine. Our remembering, our withholding, our striking, our saying, actually, you can have that. Actually, you can go ahead and have that thing you're refusing to give me, right? Our no is just as powerful as our yes, right? I think we are, folks will tell us, just act, just start, just begin, just take the first step. There is this obsession with taking action, right? With getting to work, with hustle, with getting the job done or the project done by Q1, right? We live in a world in which we call winter Q1. We call seasons quarters. That's the world and that's the water we're swimming in, right? But our refusal to swim in that water can actually be our most productive move. I was just having a conversation with my literary agent about how self-trust is finally starting to feel safer than self-abandonment and external validation. And maybe you feel it too, right? I used to really, back when I was a software engineer and software engineer instructor, I used to crave the promotions. I used to crave being on certain stages, on certain panels, on certain lists, Forbes under 30 or 40 under 40, and, being on the cover of Fast Capitalism and Wired magazine and all these awards. I wanted the awards. I wanted the recognition. I wanted to be legible inside of these systems. right? And I look back and, I can acknowledge some of that was like this desire to almost like seek safety in external validation, seek safety in this proximity to whiteness that I thought was going to secure my survival inside capitalism, right? And I think we can all, and the degrees, right? Maybe if I had just this one more degree, or I did this one certification, I just did this, I got one more piece of paperwork, then maybe, finally, maybe I'd be rescued from the precarity of being a queer, Black, disabled woman inside of capitalism, right? And I think what I've been feeling lately is actually my refusal is starting to feel safer, right? It's like lack of self-trust is starting to feel like the most unsafe thing I could possibly do inside of watching all of these systems crumble and clamor to machines and AI agents in order to keep this thing afloat, in order to keep this lie afloat, right? Like it's actually starting, when we see the anti-intellectual movements happening and what's happening inside of universities, we see how our peers, our talented peers are getting laid off, right? And what's starting to actually feel like we were sold the lie that trusting in these systems was actually the safest thing that we can do. And that distrusting ourselves was actually the safest thing that we could do. And what's starting to feel truer and truer, and I hope you feel it too, is that as these systems crumble, as we watch them deteriorate, as we watch the old world fall, as we watch empire pull out all of its stops at breakneck speed, it is starting to actually feel safer to say, nah, I trust myself. Nah, I trust this unknown path ahead, this unpaved path ahead. I trust the dark, 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 dark wilderness of my desire. I trust the people to the left and the right of me, right? I trust us to feel and find our way through because that, what's going on over there is a hot mess, right? And on Threads, I recently said, trust that aligning your desire with your capacity is your only job right now. Trust that aligning your desire with your capacity is your only job right now. And this is a reminder to self, right? I sometimes feel myself resenting my own capacity. And I remember that is capitalism. I remember that is patriarchy. I remember that is the violence of colonization, right? That voice, that posture that has me resent how much time I actually need to grieve, right? How I can't actually suppress the rawness I feel, the grief I feel watching this collective moment we're in. Somehow, why can't I just suppress that and get through the workday, like a normal person? And I'm like, oh no, right? We remember that is racial capitalism, that is patriarchy, that is the violence of colonization that says your suppression is the only thing that is going to guarantee your survival. And what we know when we connect back to spirit, when we connect back to self-respect, when we connect back to community, we know that it's feeling to the depth of our grief that unlocks our imagination towards more livable futures and more livable worlds. And it is that work, that practice that actually manifests something called survival, that actually keeps the practice of something called survival alive and possible in so many of us. Right? When I remember that my breath is the offer, that my pace is the offer, that my slowness is the offer, that my presence is the offer, that my limited capacity, My finite time on this earth in so many ways is the offer. When I remember my desire is the offer, I remember the whole point. Word to Kendra Austin, who remind us, right? Thank goodness I get to live a life where my desire is the whole point. I won't resent that. I will give thanks for that. How beautiful, how sacred, what a gift that is. When our desire is the whole point. This is the work we do in the lab. We remember our desire is the whole point. Our breath is the whole point. And work that is worthy of our breath is the baseline, not burnout. Inside the lab, we remember aligning our desire with our capacity is our only job right now. That's the only work we're being called to do right now. That's the only urgent work. So again, I hope to see you there. On the second Thursday of each month, we host a workshop on erotically engineering your labor, your capacity, and productivity inside the Laboratory of Erotic Engineering. And then on the fourth Thursday of each month, we host Open Studio. Open Studio is a show and tell space, right, where we invite you to show your erotic experiments, whether it's world building projects you're inspired by, or it's your erotic experiments that you're currently working on. And then we also invite you to tell us about the experiment. And if you're the world builder running the experiment, we'll invite you to tell us about the kind of feedback you're looking for, if any. So a lot of folks inside the Laboratory of Erotic Engineering use the sacred intimacy of Open Studio to share projects in progress, right? And to incubate their ideas where it doesn't, it maybe might not feel safe to practice in public around it yet, but because there's some tender questions, there's some insights or some gaps that we maybe feel like are missing, or there's some things maybe we're not seeing, right? And inside of Open Studio, we invite you to allow us to witness the work in progress and kind of think alongside you when you're ready for that kind of interaction and engagement. And of course, inside the Laboratory of Erotic Engineering, you get access to the full library of past erotic engineering workshops. The link is in the show notes to enroll. Cancel at any time. Join us for a month, a season, or a year, right? We aim to practice with you as long as the timing feels aligned. Also, just a quick note, the sliding scale pricing, the solidarity pricing has been updated. So there's an accessible point of entry for all working class folks. I did not make this decision lightly. Y'all, I have been a DoorDasher, a server, a retail worker, a bartender, a full-time artist living on grants, a consultant, right? An organizational nonprofit consultant. I've been a software engineer, a business owner, and so much more. I've been everything from a gig worker to a white collar employee to a founder. I've also been unemployed. All right. My point is, I've occupied multiple tax codes inside my labor journey of surviving capitalism. And looking back, I wish I had a space like this to remember all the ways my work isn't tied to my worth. Wherever you are in your labor journey, I hope you'll allow us to hold it as sacred. I hope you'll allow us to hold it as erotic. So be it. See to it. Breathe through it.